Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion. Only smart takes, never any clickbait, and it's a Victory Monday. We're going to be breaking down the Niners' victory over the Falcons on Sunday Night Football, 20-10. We're going to go over the good, which there was a lot, the bad, which there was a little bit of. We're going to go over injuries, takeaways, what it means for the Niners now that they are 5-2. No more preamble. Let's jump right into it. And if you listened to the podcast last week, I told you that Atlanta is not as good as advertised. They had the benefit of playing a Monday night game the week before, nationally televised against Buffalo, and that defense was flying around, wreaking havoc for Josh Allen. Bijan Robinson had multiple explosive plays. What did he have? Close to or over 200 yards, then close to 200 yards of total offense. And it skewed perceptions of what this Falcon team is or how good this Falcon team is. Even, and George Kittle said it in the post-game press conference, on paper and on the field, but on paper, yes, the number 2 offense in the league, which is still wildly shocking. The number 1 defense in the league based on yards, and the pass defense much better than the run defense going into the 49er game, and what actually happened, what played out on Sunday night with San Francisco and Atlanta. But remember, this is a team that beat Minnesota at Minnesota when J.J. McCarthy was the quarterback, and he's not very good. And they beat Washington at home without Jaden Daniels. And that whole Washington team is taking a step back. Everybody's the darling based on what they did the year before. Washington going to the NFC Championship game. Now they're 3-4? And I know Jaden Daniels missed some time, but that defense, led by Dan Quinn as the head coach, is bad. The Cowboys put up 44 on them. And I know Washington was missing Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. I threw Luke McCaffrey in. I needed a receiver of one of my fantasy teams, figuring he would get a target or a catch. 0 for. Lions 2 years ago, NFC Championship game, have a great regular season, one and done in the playoffs, beaten by Washington. You never know. But Atlanta, 2 of those wins were against bad quarterbacks, and they lost 30-0 at Carolina. A good team, guys, does not lose 30-0 to the Carolina Panthers. I don't care that they're 4-3. They beat the Jets. Great. Good for them to get over 500. And Chuba Hubbard is now back with Rico Dowdle to make it a 1-2 running back punch. But, their quarterback isn't anything special, right? Bryce Young, nothing special at all. So these numbers for the defense are inflated based on who they've played. Baker Mayfield didn't go crazy week 1. Josh Allen didn't go crazy last week. And Mac Jones didn't go crazy for San Francisco either. But this is a long-winded way of me saying Atlanta is not as good as people think. And that's not to take anything away from what San Francisco did. But the Niners, with such a banged-up defense, even with Saleh, playing his best Dumbledore card as a wizard defensively, a number 2 offense in the NFL should put up more than 10 points, and a terrible running effort by Atlanta. Again, the Niners had a lot to do with this, but Atlanta went into this game severely overrated. And if you listened to this podcast last week, I might have been the only one that was voicing that opinion. Now, I'm not a Niner homer at all. I just believe my eyes. Now, the good. Let's start out a whole lot of it. The run defense for San Francisco was fantastic. This is a Falcon team leading the NFL going into this game. Yards per game at about $151 a game. They were limited to 20 rushes for 62 yards. Bijan Robinson himself, 14 for 40 yards. You cannot say enough good things about a team whose run defense, they had a better showing against Atlanta than they did last week against, it wasn't Bucky Irving, it was Rashad White and the Buccaneers. Both running backs, Rashad White and whoever his backup was, each had a rushing touchdown. Baker Mayfield was good for about 25-ish, 30 yards. But they put the clamps down against a team with a better O-line than Tampa Bay, better running backs than Tampa Bay. The key, though, is not nearly as good of a quarterback as Tampa Bay. And that's where the Falcons fell apart and where they are going to fall apart later on this year when they play teams just as good as them or better, because Michael Penix is a very young quarterback. It's his 10th or 11th start. He's not going to beat you himself. He needs everything else around him to go right. And the biggest thing around him that was leading to explosive plays and big gains and wins was Bijan, and the defense contained him, averaging 164 a game coming in. He was held to 92 total yards and 1 receiving touchdown, little flare pass when they were inside the 10, and Bijan took it in really with not much resistance. I said going into this game, if they can hold Bijan to about $110, $120, they'd have a really good shot of winning the game. You hold him under 95, the chances of winning rise exponentially. Again, Saleh, youth on the D-line, not much of a pass rush, which got worse after this game. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Youth in the secondary, losing Renardo Green. We're going to talk about that more. Playing all 4 safeties somewhat interchangeably, although Jair Brown got most of the most snaps of the 4. There were a lot of moving parts in the 49er defense. We didn't even talk about Tatum Bethune taking over for Fred Warner. A lot of moving parts, and to hold this Falcon team to 3.1 yards per carry, tip the cap to Saleh and company. This season might really be a what if season for San Francisco. What if they were healthy? What if they were, 100% healthy would be great, but what if they had Ayuk and Pearsall for the majority of the games? What if Kittle didn't get hurt? What if Bosa and Warner? I think we're going to look back on this season, because it's more than likely not a Super Bowl season, right? Unless the defense, when they get all the pieces back and the timing and everything starts to gel, if the offense can play at a consistently elite level to make up for everything that's going wrong on defense, then they have a puncher's chance, right? To make some noise should they get in the playoffs. But this feels like the ultimate, man, like if they're playing this hard, this scrappy, clawing for everything, not backing down, and they're missing so many players, and they go into a game missing a lot of players. Mid-game, they're missing more players. They missed 3, got knocked out of this game, and we'll talk about that again in a minute. Boy, to be 5-2, any fans out there that are still pissing and moaning about the Niners and how they're looking, or finding things to nitpick. And I'm sure I'm going to. I have my list of things I want to talk about. Not everything was rosy for San Francisco, but guys, you got to enjoy the ride right now. It's all gravy. The Niners are playing with house money basically for the rest of the season. Let's talk about more good stuff. I didn't mean to go off on a little bit of a tangent. The Falcons were converting on third down 45% of the time, which is higher than you like. You like a team in the 30s. The Niners were 8 of 15 or 8 of 14, whatever it may be, but 60% converted on 60% of third downs. The Niners had some nice long drives, sustained drives, had to gave one up on a tipped interception, should have had a long reception by Demarcus Robinson. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But that number 1 defense of Atlanta was getting run through. Again, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Tatum Bethune. Welcome, Tatum Bethune, wearing Fred Warner's original OG number 48 jersey to the game. And I think D. Winters, Bethune said, wore a Fred Warner 54 jersey to the game as well. And it was awesome to see Warner there, a handful of days after surgery, 5 days after surgery, and then being there at the entrance to the locker room after the game, greeting everybody. That's leadership, man. Like and you could tell it how much the players love and respect him. You know, Tatum Bethune, D Winters, Nick Martin's had some nice things to say, and then everybody else, defense and offensively. But Bethune carried that Warner energy, got a good 3 days of practice in this week. Strong game, 10 total tackles with 1 tackle for loss and almost a sack diving at the legs. Actually, he was trying to like work over a defender. I was wondering if they're going to call that roughing the passer since Bethune was going below the waist. But then that was wiped out because I think it was illegal contact on Demo that wound up giving a first down. But Bethune, again, a young player. This is only his first start. He hasn't seen much time. There's going to be ups and downs, ebbs and flows, but this was a great coming out party on national TV for Bethune and a lot of these young players and a lot of the older players who you saw after the game, McCaffrey and Williams and Bethune getting those, I don't know, velvet silk jackets for National Running Back Day and those plastic gold chains that they were all good sports wearing. So happy for players when they are given their opportunity to step up, and they step up, especially young players. And another one, maybe not quite as young, but Chase Lucas starting for an injured Upton Stout who injured his ankle the last play of practice on Friday, because why not? Strong game in blitzing, in run support, in coverage, and no bigger play than when Lucas was lined up on Drake London, 4th and 1. London runs an out. Lucas undercuts it, almost there with the pick. I don't know if it was going to be a pick 6. They kept saying that because Lucas was falling down anyway, but broke that up. Niners get the ball back. It was 13-20 at that point. If Upton Stout can't go again this upcoming week against Houston, we should all feel very comfortable with Chase Lucas in the slot. Now, I mentioned the safeties. This necessarily isn't a good, but this is an FYI. All 4 safeties played. And Robert Saleh mentioned he's still trying to figure out the combination that works best. How it worked against Atlanta, Jair Brown played all 65 snaps. Malik Mustafa played 45 snaps. Jason Pinnock, 35. And Marquise Siegel, 20. They're still ramping Mustafa up. And if they think Brown and Mustafa is the best combination, Mustafa may play in the mid-50s or close to every snap against Houston, and maybe he'll be fully back against the Giants. But they do run some 3 safety sets. So Pinnock or Siegel, it'll be curious who's going to be the 3rd safety off the bench when that happens. Now, again, so many good things about the defense. Again, it just leaves you with that what if they had Bosa in a legitimate pass rush? What if Warner was there as well? What if Bernardo Green doesn't miss the next couple days? But the defense, again, I think it's still an overrated Falcon team. Pass defense is legit. Jeff Ulbrich was sending it quite a bit at Mac Jones. Only sacked once early on in the game. I think it was the first drive, right? Wasn't really touched after that. And the offense, the quarterback's best friend, is a strong running game. And finally, week 7, game 7, the running game busts out 39 for 174 and 2 touchdowns per George Kittle in the post-game press conference. And I think it was apparent during the game, even before Chris Collinsworth said it, they were running right at Atlanta. Did they try some outside zones? Yes. I remember one working for McCaffrey and a couple getting snuffed out for losses. But when they decided to run the ball right at the Falcon D tackles and right down their throat, they ran it with a lot of success, not just CMC, but with Brian Robinson as well. More power football. And this was a Falcon team that was allowing 114 rushing yards per game. So you felt like, all right, the Niners were going into this game averaging 84, 85 rushing yards a game. God, if they could just get to 114, we'd all feel good. Like, that's a win. But they go for 174, and the 39 rushes, it was volume and quality. Excuse me. It was quantity and quality, led by Christian McCaffrey, who had a vintage, I mean, beyond vintage game, right? Top three McCaffrey games since he's been with San Francisco. Ran it 24 times for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns, 7 receptions for 72 yards, 201 total yards, 2 touchdowns, and 31 total touches. After the game, I don't know if it was Trent Williams, I guess, when they were being interviewed, said that Kyle Shanahan this week said this is going to be a Christian McCaffrey game. In the first 6 weeks of the season, I'm sure at some point in one of those 6 weeks, he said, or more than once, that this is going to be a Christian McCaffrey game because the offense, especially with Kittle out, runs through McCaffrey. So I'm not here saying this like, oh, well, Kyle said it was a McCaffrey game, and look what happens when it's a McCaffrey game. Guys, one of the 6 games before this one or more had to have been McCaffrey games as well. Touches, I know we're concerned about that. He is on a historic pace in a bad way in terms of number of touches. Put this in perspective. The Atlanta Falcons were the number 1 rushing team. They still might be the number 1 rushing team in the league. I haven't checked the stats. But going into this game, McCaffrey had more carries by himself than the entire Falcons team. And it's interesting when you think about it because this game was never out of hand for Atlanta, right? At most, it was a 10-point game. 3-0 Atlanta. Then the Niners got up, was it what, 7-3, and then 10-3, 13-3, 13-10, 20-10. It was always a close game. The Falcons didn't really abandon the run, but they put more on Michael Penix than I thought they would. Now, the Niners were playing the run pretty well, and I'm still shocked, and I'm sure you guys are. The 4th and 1, they decided to throw an out instead of running the ball. And and even more perplexing, on that 4th and 1, they took Bijan out, and it was just Tyler Algier. Maybe that was supposed to make the Niners think that it is definitely a run since we're bringing in our bigger power back. Although, oh my God, I mean, what can't Bijan Robinson do? Speed back, power back, elusive, receiving back. But Raheem Morris and company put more on Michael Penix this game than their running game. And I think that's what contributed to a loss. Again, too young of a quarterback. Niners took advantage of it. They didn't turn him over. The one turnover they got was the strip sack. Penix did throw a touchdown. He's around 60% completion percentage. He played an okay game, but he's not a quarterback yet that is going to beat you, even though Kyle Pitts had a nice game, like 7 receptions. I think London only had about 4. Bijan had maybe 4 or 5 or 6 receptions. They don't have the multitude of weapons in the passing game like some other teams do. And Michael Penix just isn't there yet. He's young. But when you flip it around, Mac, he was generally efficient. 17 of 26, 152 yards, the interception off of Juwan Jennings' hand, not really Mac's fault. Now, this is the second consecutive game that Mac has played that he has not thrown a touchdown pass. Is that concerning for anybody? I don't know. Maybe. Right? You can't. I mean, they lost against Tampa Bay, only 1 touchdown and 4 field goals, 2 rushing touchdowns by McCaffrey against Atlanta, and McCaffrey's accounted for all 3 touchdowns their last 2 games. They're not going to be able to continue beating teams without Mac Jones or the quarterback throwing touchdowns, right? So, again, scrappy, clawing, finding a way to win. And they knew going into this game that Atlanta, on paper, but also on the field, a very good number 1 defense. The Niners defense played better than the Falcons defense. The Niners offense played better than the Falcons offense. The Niners running game played better than the Falcons running game. The Niners special teams with Pinheiro, 2 field goals, 2 extra points, played better than the Falcons special teams. The Niners, a complete victory. Little love for Connor Colby on that play that they thought was a fumble or a pass. And if it was a fumble, it would have come back to the spot of the fumble. Ruled a pass. Colby catches it, charges a couple yards, little yard after the catch for the offensive lineman, keeps the Niners in field goal range, and Eddie Pinheiro connects. And what about Eddie Pinheiro? You know, people are calling him Eddie Dinero Pinheiro, because he's money. Another 2 field goals, another 2 extra points. Perfect on field goals. Was it 17 for 17 now? In his time with San Francisco, special teams, such a big thing, at least for the kicker and scoring points. The kick return unit, again, not fantastic for San Francisco. Morstead had some nice punts. Sky Moore got away from punts inside the 10. Naturally, one was down at about the 2 or 3, but that was the right decision. I hope that was hammered into his friggin' head all week and continues to be. And lastly, in terms of the good guys, sometimes you have to be lucky, and it's okay to be lucky, meaning Atlanta at the end of the half, Michael Penix gets called for the intentional grounding, doesn't get outside the tackle box, throws the ball far enough and high enough out of bounds that it doesn't land until 10 seconds left. 10-second runoff. Atlanta does not get a chance for 3 points at the end of the half. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but again, that's a young quarterback. A more veteran QB probably doesn't make that mistake. Or, he gets out of the, and I don't recall if Penix maybe had a chance to get outside. I know he's lefty. He would have wanted to roll left. But if you're going to throw it away immediately at the feet of a running back or more quickly so you don't have the refs giving you a chance or potentially calling that 10-second runoff. Luck is okay. Think of how it's about time the Niners were lucky with something. Even that whole Connor Colby pulling McCaffrey into the end zone stuff that should have been a penalty. Why is it okay then for offensive linemen if a running back is going this way, left to right, and a running back gets behind, an offensive lineman gets behind the running back, it's okay to keep pushing him forward, but it's not okay to pull him forward? That very well may be a rule. If it is, I think it's a shit rule. And it probably wasn't called because there was such a big scrum that maybe to the referees, it looked like Colby was just getting knocked into the end zone along with McCaffrey because of all of the scrumness and force that was going on from about the 3-yard line on. But if you can do a tush push and you can do a scrum where, running back are trying to gain yards, and you have your whole offensive team trying to push him forward, then to me, I don't give a shit that penalty wasn't called, because if you can push him forward, you can pull him forward too. I don't even care if it's in the rule books. Now the bad. All right. We're not going to be picky here. The drops by Robinson and Juwan Jennings. Demarcus Robinson had, and you heard Chris Collinsworth say it, essentially a fair catch. Fall into his hands. Yes, there was a receiver that kind of went behind him, draped an arm in front, but the ball went right through his hands. It was a basket catch, right through his arms. That could have set San Francisco up for another 3 points. And remember, the Niners were driving. They were inside, the 30? When the ball went off Jennings' hands, tipped interception that Mac Jones got in on the action to tackle the linebacker who picked it. That could have been another 3 points. So as lucky as the Niners were to avoid the Falcons getting a field goal attempt at the end of the first half, the Falcons the Falcons did nothing to cause Juwan Jennings to drop that ball. It just went through his hands. Falcons were lucky enough to actually pick it. And the Falcons really didn't do anything to really distract Demarcus Robinson from dropping that, 30, 40-yard catch. This game, you can argue, maybe shouldn't have been this close. Maybe it's a 13-point win. Maybe it's a 16-point win, whatever. But maybe it's not a 13-10 game where we're all biting our nails and hoping that Chase Lucas makes that big play on the sideline to knock that pass away from Drake London to give the Niners possession. Now, more bad is more injuries. Renardo Green left the game with a toe injury. Let's assume it's turf toe, because what else can technically happen to a toe unless it got stepped on with a cleat and maybe you break a bone or whatever. But he didn't return. Darrell Luter came in, played beyond serviceable. So again, 3rd-year corner, good for Darrell Luter. Renardo Green, per Kyle, is going to be out for a few weeks, which means welcome Eli Apple up from the practice squad, probably as a standard elevation against the Texans. Additionally, Jake Brendel, hurt. Now, I know there's not a lot of fans of Jake Brendel. Hamstring injury. He's going to be done for a couple weeks. Matt Hennessy, the backup, came in, played really well. Listen, they were running the ball well with Jake Brendel. Then they started running the ball well with Matt Hennessy. No one could say like, oh, well, sit Jake Brendel. Matt Hennessy played a great game. Yeah, he played about 20 more snaps than Jake Brendel. I get it, but they were running the ball well throughout the game. And I'm not one that's actually going to buy into a lot of the reasoning for the running game being better just because George Kittle was in. Again, think about where those runs were happening. They were happening between the tackles. Now, is George Kittle a better blocker than Jake Tonjes, who disappeared? Jake Tonjes, viable receiving tight end. No looks. Congrats. You're back to your third tight end. Unbelievable, Kyle. And Luke Farrell is more of a blocker anyway, but Kittle is obviously a more dominant blocker and a much better pass receiver. There was like a play or two where you saw him kind of coming around, leading up the middle, clearing away from McCaffrey, but that wasn't every play, guys. If there was 39 rushing attempts, think about it this way. How many actual runs do you think George Kittle's block was responsible for springing McCaffrey or Robinson? I don't even want to hazard a guess. Like, is it 5? Is it 8? Is it 10? That's still, even if it's 10, that's a quarter of the runs. And George Kittle's impact should have been felt more in the passing game because of the eyes he draws when he runs a route, more so than Jake Tonjes, right? That's why when Pearsall comes back, that's going to help. Ayuk comes back, that's going to help. It's going to spread the defense out more in a manner of speaking because you don't have just McCaffrey and Jennings to key on. Kendrick Bourne only had, I think, a catch or two. So coming off of 242-yard game back-to-back, he went back to being a supplementary offensive weapon, but it's because the running game was working so well, and Kyle didn't get away from it, thank Christ. Kyle gets stupid sometimes. Something's working. Let's go away from it. Maybe we'll catch him. No. Like the Packer NFC Championship game against Green Bay in 2019, if you're running the ball that well, run it down their goddamn throat. Because I promise you, and that's the knock on that was the knock that year, right? Well, Jimmy only threw the ball like 10 times that game or less. He's not going to be ready for the Super Bowl, and he had a great first 3 quarters until things fell apart in the fourth. Imagine if the Niners lost that NFC Championship game because Kyle got away from the run and they were gashing the shit out of Green Bay. Fans will crucify you every which way if a team gives them a chance to. Kyle did not get away from the run. Now, 39 runs is like ideal for him, but if they can get high 20s, low 30s, I'm happy because that's still a good, because you figure maybe Max throwing it low 30s in terms of attempts, or Brock when Brock returns. But going back to like the O-line, so Hennessy in, Brendel's going to be out for a few weeks, and we found out today that Bryce Huff has an injured hamstring, hurt it on the last or second to last play of the game. So he will be out for a few weeks. We'll see if Yetur Gross-Matos can come back from the knee and hamstring injury. Otherwise, they're going to have to welcome back Robert Beal or a standard elevation from the practice squad. Bring him up to go with Michael Williams, Sam O, and Travis Gibson. They also have William Bradley King that they can elevate. So they'll have 4 defensive ends for the Texan game, but I'm curious if one of these 3, Renardo Green, Jake Brendel, or Bryce Huff, if one of them are going to go on IR just to get somebody back. And if I was going to, again, I have no idea how, let's say they're all 2 to 4 week injuries. I think the one that you put on IR maybe is Brendel, because then at least you have Hennessy at center, and then you can call up Nick Sakiel as a practice squad elevation or to the active roster as your backup center in that case. I think if Huff can come back before weeks of Renardo Green, you might want to roll the dice like that. But even the same with Brock Purdy, every week, he's getting close. He's getting close. He has a chance. And that said, on Monday and Tuesday, he had no fucking chance, Brock Purdy, to play the last couple of weeks. And now it's if he's going to play against the Texans, although I think the Niners are hedging their bets with Mac. Played pretty clean. Again, the interception wasn't his fault. No touchdowns. Didn't get banged up. Hopefully the knee is now maybe an extra couple days better. And they're going to give Brock every possible day, every possible week he can get to get healthy healthy, not healthy enough to play, healthy, and then swap him out for Mac, and then Mac will be on the bench, and hopefully he can get his knee healthy. But it wouldn't be a game if the Niners didn't lose 3 more starters: corner, center, and defensive end, which is already ridiculously depleted. Now, my takeaways for the game, guys: this is a youngish 49er team, right? The age really comes in with Trent Williams, with John Weeks at long snapper, and with Thomas Moorhead as your punter, because they're all either 40 or pretty darn close to it. Otherwise, yeah, you have Warner's 28-ish. I know Kittle's like maybe 31 or 32, but there's youth at receiver. There's youth at running back behind McCaffrey, who's 29 or going to be 30. They have their fair share of 20, late 20s, early 30-year-olds, but the depth behind these starters are all young. A lot of first, second, or third year players. And maybe this game showed that the Niners' depth is a little bit better than we think. Remember, the only benefit to injuries to starters or star players, is that the backups who would never otherwise get valuable reps and playing time are getting valuable reps and playing time. So you can see now what a Tatum Bethune can bring. You can see now in the next couple of weeks what Darrell Luter can be, what Matt Hennessy can be at safety, what Trevis Gibson. I mean, he showed out well enough. And it's also a war of attrition. They're just running out of bodies at defensive end. Was on the practice squad, played well in the preseason, had a good game against the Rams. And then was he promoted for the Tampa game? No, he was elevated for the Tampa game and then promoted to the active roster for this game. You show out well, you have injuries in your position group, you're going to probably be elevated to the 53-man roster. Said it last week and other weeks, right? Another Niner game, more Niner injuries. And again, it is 3 more, but the depth is being tested, but they're also responding. Offensively, the whole receiver shuffle and flux, the new receiver in this week was Malik Turner. He was basically elevated for special teams. Jordan Watkins, we're going to probably wait a while to see what you can do, my friend. I mean, I don't think Kyle wants to risk a rookie in the mix here when the margin for error for this team is slim, right? Turnover battle this game 1-1. If it was 2-1 in favor of Atlanta, maybe they don't win this game. Let's get back to Atlanta. And I said it before, but my takeaway is Michael Penix has a bright future, but he's a young quarterback. And the Niners, although Penix had a solid game, the Niners were able to get to him, 2 sacks, some other pressures, rattle him, throwaways, and of course, before halftime, the big intentional grounding that possibly took 3 points away from Atlanta. The flip side to this is not every quarterback is going to be Michael Penix. So more veteran, savvy quarterbacks that can withstand San Francisco's non-pass rush. And it'll be more non-existent now with Bryce Huff, the Baker Mayfields of the world, the Matthew Staffords, Jared Goff. Who knows what Sam Darnold Part 2 is going to look like week 18 in Santa Clara. And we're not even mentioning quarterbacks in the AFC. Jordan Love, at this point. The Niners, when you're playing a quarterback, and they have some on their schedule still, that is not established, that is young, right? That you could maybe confuse. Or in Atlanta's case, they put it more on Penix's shoulders than the running game, which is still confusing, even though they weren't getting the runs that they wanted to. Again, averaging only 3.1 yards per carry. You're the number 1 running team in the league. The Niners are a middle of the pack run defense. The fact that they didn't stick with it and the Niners did, another clear reason why the Niners came out on top. It didn't have to be 39 rushes for 174 yards total. It could have been 39 for 124. But that volume was what mattered most. It sustained drives. And of course, they did have some gashing runs for sure. Both running backs, in McCaffrey and Robinson. But Atlanta, in some weird ways, played into the Niners' hands the way the Rams did when the Rams were like, we're not going to run the ball on San Francisco because we know we can throw it all over the joint. And when they tried to run it in overtime to get that first down, they couldn't. And it's not like the Rams were even running at a bad clip. They were, I think, averaging close to 5 yards per carry that game. Biggest takeaway, mathematically, that keeps the Niners atop the NFC West with tiebreakers over the Rams. Seattle is playing later tonight. I'm recording this on Monday, but most importantly, that nobody's talking about, this is a tiebreaker against Atlanta. If the Niners don't win the NFC West, and there's a real chance that they don't, if they have a head-to-head win over Atlanta, which is a team that's probably going to win more than they lose. Now, Tampa's going to win that division. Carolina's a nice story. They're 4-3. I can't see them getting to 9 or 10 wins. Obviously, the North between Green Bay and Detroit and Minnesota will hang around. The Bears will hang around a little bit. That's another game later in the season. Head-to-head in Santa Clara, getting that win knocks another potential wild card team down a peg. And of course, in your own division, Seattle and the Rams, Dallas 3-1. I think Washington's fading. The Giants, an all-time collapse yesterday. Absolutely ridiculous. The Eagles are just obviously going to run away with the East, so that's not going to matter. But to get, and independent of the tiebreaker with Atlanta, it's another NFC win. Yeah, they have an NFC loss to Tampa, but otherwise it's to Jacksonville. They've beaten, as long as they don't play any more teams from Florida, the Niners might go 15-2 because that's where their 2 losses are. Now, we're not getting that crazy. That's not going to be the case. But at 5-2, with 10 games to go, right? 17, yeah. Are we saying, is anyone here think that the rest of the way the Niners can't go 5-5? They got the Rams again. They got the Seahawks again. They got the Cardinals again. Then you have the Titans, the Bears, the Panthers, the Browns, which will be a tough game because Jim Schwartz's defense is always going to be tough. The Colts, who looks a lot better than expected. But if the Niners go 5-5, at some point this becomes a game of math, right? If the Niners can go 5-5 the rest of the way, that's 10-7 and probably good enough for a wild card. If they can go 6-4, that's 11-6, and that might win the West. And the most important games upcoming are going to be the divisional games, right? I'm not saying you don't worry about everything else, but a divisional game, an NFC game, yeah, you want to stomp the Titans. You want to win and beat a good team, in the Colts at Indianapolis. And same with Cleveland. They lost the last time they played there. But there are the Giants, who, even though they had that epic collapse, Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo, giving that team energy, giving that team life. If that Giant defense plays most games the way they did the first 3 quarters in Denver, they're going to be a tough out for a lot of teams. Now, let's hope the Eagles smack the shit out of them this upcoming weekend so they maybe limp into MetLife Stadium and the Niners can maybe take advantage there. But at 5-2, this 3-game stretch, I said Atlanta, Houston, and the Giants, if they can go 2-1 and get to 6-3 right before the trade deadline, then a big trade is in play. Then maybe they take a swing at Hendrickson, maybe Kayvon Thibodeau, maybe Bradley Chubb of the Dolphins. Maybe you bring Chase Young back from the Saints or Carl Granderson, the other Saints pass rusher. There's going to be options. Teams are going to be sellers. I don't think anybody wants to be with the Dolphins anymore, starting with Mike McDaniel, head coach. He might be joining the Niners staff sometime mid-season. Stacking these wins, these NFC wins, these head-to-head wins against teams that are vying for playoff positioning. And Atlanta still has, I'm sure, designs on their division. There's a lot of football left to be played. They have 11 more games. Niners have 10 more. So big. Think about how different 5-2 feels versus 4-3, right? 3 games above 500 versus 1 game. And going to Houston, who tonight, if I can stay up, it's a 10 o'clock Eastern start. Hopefully they can knock around Seattle, but maybe it's an overtime game, long drawn out. Maybe Houston has a couple injuries. I'm not hoping for that, but it's a violent physical game. And they're on a short week going back home for the Niners coming in. I think it's a 1 o'clock start Eastern next Sunday. Guys, 5-2, got to be happy with this. This might not, and probably is not, a Super Bowl caliber team right now. And this might not be a Super Bowl caliber year, but this might be one of the most fun teams to watch in recent memory, outside of teams that are like high flying, scoring a lot of points. Obviously, the 2023 team, any other Super Bowl teams or Super Bowl winning teams going back to the 80s and 90s, but such a fun team to watch because of the resilience. How many more bad hands are the NFL gods going to deal San Francisco? Again, losing 3 more starters against Atlanta, chugging along to a win, and we'll see what they can do as they go on the road for the next 2 at Houston and at the Giants. And we will cover the Houston game either on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. I have to leave that open just with schedules getting so crazy. We will definitely cover it before Sunday. I'm hoping Thursday at the earliest, but Friday might be more realistic. Guys, Victory Monday, or whenever you are watching or listening, feels good. Felt good to beat a good team, but in my heart of hearts, a team that was a bit overrated coming in. But it's an overrated team going up against an undermanned Niner team. And the undermanned Niner team still doubled them up 20-10 and shut that running game down. Guys, whatever you are doing between now and when we speak again, stay happy, healthy, and safe. We will talk soon. Thanks all.